Hey guys, so today's episode is going to be pretty practical and actually focused on the so-called Zealot Checklist that I shared in our previous series. So the main idea today is to actually do some practical analysis of how we can apply marketing for our day-to-day. And as I mentioned a bit earlier, marketing is really something that you can work on as a part of a large suite of different types of requirements, meaning that you may use it for traditional sales, for B2B and B2C. You may be selling some partnerships, you may be doing some community building. So it's pretty broad simply because marketing is the way you essentially package your product or your offering, the way that you present yourself in front of the world, which is where branding comes into play as well. And more or less, this is the way you get in front of an audience and again present what you have to offer in the best possible manner. The way that you target your unique selling proposition to the world, the way that you present yourself, your skills, your expertise, your product, and everything else that you're in charge of as a part of the kind of bigger picture. So, since again there are so many different applications, and most of the training courses out there talk about marketing in the sense of selling, in the sense of presenting a kind of unique path, building a marketing funnel, and building an audience only to sell a specific product or supplement the sales for a B2B sales process. I'd like to take a different angle here and discuss marketing as a part of becoming public speaker. Now, the reason I'm taking this one again is first off, there are already way too many courses discussing product marketing or marketing for services. So this is really being beaten up to death. And the second thing is that almost everyone who's really trying to build their brand and who's kind of a public figure in charge of marketing one way or another, they are anyway in charge of public speaking through different forms. Now, I'm going to tackle the angle where you use public speaking to sell your products, or you're trying to make some money off through selling courses, or again, building courses online and so forth. And also, of course, becoming a keynote speaker or someone else who's actively trying to sell their services through speaking engagements, landing leads for consulting through speaking gigs, and things like that. So I'm actually going to jump straight to the point. Again, to recap the Zealot checklist, we're actually going to move more or less toward this checklist and try to apply it in practice. With one added twist that we are also going to discuss the funnels, because we are in marketing, meaning that we need to build a marketing funnel which has top of the funnel pretty much everyone else, middle of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel. So for starters, we're going to start with step one, which is establishing the business goals and the purpose of the marketing endeavors. Now, we already now went through some of those goals. The business goals for a public speaker, again, are trying to land some gigs, trying to get invited to specific speaking events, which is, of course, super important. Trying to land any ways to teach courses, which are, of course, paid courses. Becoming a keynote speaker eventually, selling through speaking, meeting your audience through speaking, building your brand and online portfolio, becoming more credible as a speaker. Eventually, of course, if you have products, you can sell those products through your talks and do case studies over the course of your presentation. So it's really diverse, but this is more or less the business goals and the purpose of those activities, which we are going to tackle here. Now, focus, of course, is extremely important. So you really need to pick one or two different verticals. You don't want to become unless, of course, you're in the public speaking space yourself, you don't want to offer everything as a part of the public speaking endeavor. Why? Well, it's going to be pretty hard to set specific KPIs. It's going to be very hard to define your persona and your audience and whatnot. So with that in mind, it's best to really pick one or two of those and then apply them into practice. So I'm going to jump into buyer personas or your target audiences. Now, this is going to be broken down into two different subcategories because you have two steps of the process. The first one is your actual buyer personas or your actual target audiences. Now, again, if you're selling Udemy courses, if you're unaware of Udemy, it's a pretty popular marketplace for creating videos online. Needless to say, you can create your own course, sell it on Udemy, and basically make up some revenue. But the goal of Udemy is they're really trying to pretend they're selling expensive courses, but every time you go to the website, you're going to see that you get 90% discounts. It's kind of a last-minute offer and all of those trendy concepts that people often implement to spark scarcity. And scarcity is a way to scare you that it's a very time constrained offer. It's a limited opportunity for you to take advantage of this, only to be able to again, get a course for a really low cost, something that's completely different from the actual price of the course itself. Now, with that in mind, this may be something that you're interested in doing. As I said, if this is your target audience, you're targeting specific consumers. And depending on your industry, depending on your vertical, you're trying to target a specific group of people who are geographically based somewhere. So that, again, you're going to target events in that geographic location, probably people with specific genders. You're going to have to research what sort of conferences available out there. Are they matching your kind of specific target audience? Because, as you know, diversity is often a problem in conferences. White males are often mostly represented at different conferences. So you may be looking for something that's more specific if you're targeting a specific race, specific religion, or females, or something else that's not really that standard, so to speak, for events, is what I'm trying to say here. So that's kind of one way to put it. Of course, if you're selling books, you may be aiming for pretty much everyone, or for beginners, if your books is for beginners and the way to train newbies. If you're selling unique enterprise services, you may be targeting specific events that meet people from those services. But it's really important to get some form of a persona. We've discussed personas here. I shared in our previous post that there are specific personas that you can work with. So you can get more or less any type of template, like let's say our Devrix template here. Ideally, if you're already selling, if you already have some sales, if you already have some success stories, it's best to just fill out the details here. So let's say your best client is called John. He's 42 years old, status probably married with one or two kids, based in I don't know, San Diego, and then having some details about him. John is really great personality, very passionate, really intrigued by innovation and new challenges. Just filling out everything else here. It's important to understand what is the motivation and what are the goals and challenges for this John. So again, if you're selling courses, if you're selling books, if you're selling services, you need to define it for your specific audience. What's the motivation for them to be buying your book? Motivation could be learning how to present in front of people better, learning how to deliver better sales trainings better. In our case, like delivering marketing content here, could be learning how to build their own business, or learning how to make a business on the side, or learning how to provide better recruitment techniques for their own team, and doing employer branding and something else. Then we have the goals and challenges. Like, again, if you take the creating business vertical, goals and challenges would be the goals: creating new business, grow it to 10 people, generate $2 million, $3 million, $5 million of revenue over the next 2 years. And challenges, like they may not have money, there may be way too much competition, different types of things for different types of businesses depending on your target audience. Again, the reason this is so important is that you're John, who's again 42 years old, married with 2 kids from San Diego. With all those traits, they need to be your ideal buyer audience. When you're selling a book, a solution, anything else, you want to make sure that your target audience can really benefit from what you're selling. Otherwise, it really doesn't make sense, right? They are going to be, you don't want to sell, fishing rods to people who live in the forest, right? Because they may not have lakes and pools there or so, even though that's not extremely possible. But let's say you don't want to sell swimming equipment in Antarctica, because it's not really pleasant to be swimming in the cold ocean, right? So again, needless to say, you need a buyer persona. Define this buyer persona and create fill out this template with all the information for your ideal audience. As discussed in our previous course, we may have different types of personas here, simply because you may have 2 or 3 ideal groups of people to work with over time and to actually use for selling your content. But the fewer you have, the better, because it's going to be easier to create content for them, brand your social media for them, probably reference them in your course or book or the sales pages of your website or whatever else you have to sell here. So that's kind of the reason why it's so important to have personas. But the second thing you need to also establish here as persona, it's kind of a separate vertical, but it's the persona of the event organizers you're going to try to target. Because again, we've already discussed the different types of sales relationships. We've discussed B2B and B2C, selling directly to businesses, selling directly to consumers. And I also mentioned another third group of types of sales deals, which is B2B2C, like you're going to be a business selling to a business, selling to different consumers. So you may imagine that the public speaking deal is more or less a B2B2C type of deal. Why? Because if you want to be a paid public speaker, or if you want to be invited for speaking engagements in order to sell your consulting services or anything else, you actually have to convince, first and foremost, the event organizers, the teams dealing with speakers, and everyone else in charge that you're the rightful member of the speaking team. You are going to contribute with knowledge, with skills, with potentially bringing people to the venue and the event itself before actually receiving the invitation. Now, this weekend, I just received another invitation for a different event. It was mostly comprised of marketing people, so they decided to reach out to me simply because my background is a little bit different, and I already have some audience, and I can bring a different group of people to the event, which is really valuable. It helps the diversity, it helps building a larger audience, and there's no that much overlap between the different people the different speakers bring to the table, right? So this is one example to think through it. So again, if we actually focus on public speaking and how to kind of identify what's happening here, you probably want to have an example of what you're doing. Like you need to have a website, you need to have a established online presence. Of course, if you're selling a book, you probably want it published on Amazon as a Kindle version or a print version. If it's a course, probably Udemy or your own website. You can set up LearnDash or some other software that helps you sell courses online. Basically, you have to have done the legwork already, because again, this is the essentials. You don't want to bring people to nowhere. You don't want to point people to a blank website where they can't subscribe, sign up, go through a free trial, buy something. It doesn't really make that much sense at first. And again, that's not to say that marketing should be done as the latest part of the phase, but even if you're early on, even if you're adopting the lean startup principles by Eric Ries and Kraut, then again, you still need to have the concept of those people. You still need to be able to interact with those people through live chat, through email signups, to freemium subscribe buttons, something else in order to kind of retain them in some database of yours and be able to interact with them over time as your product or solution evolves. That's why email lists are that important, for that matter. So again, with that in mind, we do define those two things and we say, okay, so what does a normal public speaker do? Now, the third one is research the other influential players in the field. So you probably want to research other people who are actively doing public speaking and can potentially help you become a better, well, not potentially help you become a better public speaker, but you can get some inspiration from them and some ideas and thoughts and processes and see how to align your value here as well. So again, you can do a lot of research through LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, probably, again, depending on your audience. Most of the time, you are probably going to know these people. Those are people who go and speak at conferences you talk to. Those are people who are established public speakers. If you're a motivational speaker or a life coach, then there are some pretty popular names out there. If you're an entrepreneurial startup person like Gary Vee, or Neil Patel, then again, those are pretty popular personas that but you can find some of those as well. Now, again, you can search for something pretty basic, such as, I don't know, like top public speakers in the US, for instance. Now, again, some of those you probably know: Tony Robbins, Brian Tracy, Eric Thomas, Robert Kiyosaki. Those are some of the guys that I've been following for a while. And again, the best case scenario, you can really get to know them and learn something about them and figure out how they actually work. And you can, again, do some research and see how they act in practice. Like, let's say Tony Robbins. Now, if you get to Tony Robbins, you you want to resemble their presence as much as possible. And that's not to say that you have to clone. It's that studying everything that they have done to date will give you an idea of why they do this, how they've done this, where are their clients coming from, and other questions that you probably want to ask. Now, Tony has a featured snippet here. He has a Wikipedia profile as well. There's his website, and you can go and see how Tony Robbins is presenting himself. Now, just take a look at some of the important things he's selling as a kind of lifestyle motivational coach or whatever his specific unique niche is. Now, first you have Ask Tony. This is a call to action. Again, this is a way for other people to contact him. Of course, you have about, contribution, company culture. Then there's the first thing he sells, upcoming events. That's super important. Another thing he sells, coaching, and blog, which again is very important to analyze, and we are actually going to do that a bit later. Now, again, Tony Robbins, you can take a look at of his experiences. There are videos. This is one of the important things. It's really building his reputation, building his audience, and everything else that he's done. He has his unique selling benefits and his unique perspective of life, which is one of the parts that we're discussing in the Zealot Checklist. So again, when you browse his website, when you browse his profiles, it's really easy to identify specific recurring factors that are designed the way they are for a very good reason. And this reason is receiving invitations for keynote talks or organizing specific paid trainings with Tony, and then also helping him sell through his training systems and his coaching programs as well. Now, again, if you go through, okay, this one is sharing, which isn't super intuitive, but I'm pretty sure if you go to about or so, you can see more about his presence online and what he's done over the course of his career, see how he promotes himself, what kind of content he publishes, and everything else that he eventually does online. So that's more or less why it's so important to really do your due diligence first. Now, if we take a look at this one, and for example, review his LinkedIn profile, we got again a pretty handy featured snippet with his latest book and some of his credentials, his data, profile, articles he's been writing, 37 years of experiences in his holdings company, right? Again, this sounds impressive, at least for his perseverance and his determination and motivation and everything else that comes in. Now, sometimes you can also take advantage of specific tools that social networks present, such as People Also View It. Now, you can see the CEO of LinkedIn, other investors, other kind of influencers like Oprah Winfrey, of course, is someone else who may be your go-to resource for those things, and eventually be able to learn more about them through this kind of due diligence. And again, this will give you an idea of how to present yourself, how to sort out your website, your social profile, the voice, the tone, the way you refer to your customers, and supplemented with the buyer persona. Of course, this is going to be extremely extremely helpful to just present the best possible value ever. Now, I can also think of someone else talking about this, Josh Timely. Josh is someone I've been following for a while, mostly due to his writing activities, and he's also a fairly popular public speaker. And through his public speaking, he's also promoting his marketing agency, MWI. His books, one of those books is CMOs at Work, Chief Marketing Officers at Work. I'm really a fan of the book, so that's definitely recommended. And some other activities he's doing. He does coaching, he's selling LinkedIn training videos. I've actually paid for a bunch of the things he's selling as services. So again, if you browse his website, you can easily see that, again, there's a large profile photo of a large speaking engagement, coaching options, which his story being more personable, more personalized, featured in. I mean, you can hardly not get impressed by his exposure online, and a bunch of other ways to reach out to him. His social profile, his blog, upcoming events, and others. So all of those are really worth investigating. Again, if you, for instance, take a look at his LinkedIn, those are specific things you can establish and learn about him. First off, you can know that he's already crossed the 30,000 connections limit, which is, again, meaning that he's building his LinkedIn presence actively. So this is one way to actually reverse engineer his strategy and say, okay, so probably that's a great channel to land public speaking engagements. You can read his articles, his posts, see what works, what not, what is the audience that's interacting with you, what are the people who actually reach out to him, are there any people in his network who may be interested in your events, and so forth. Now, one more thing to look at, aside from social profiles, of course, reading his blog and see if there are any specific discussions um, that are being sparked in the comments or on social media. What type of people comment? Does he have any fans or advocates or the so-called evangelists that are really supporting his brand? Are there any specific event organizers or other influencers or business owners who may be willing to invite him to speaking engagements? And again, try to reverse engineer it and try to kind of adapt a similar workflow for yourself. Now, there was this popular, I think it was Picasso or maybe someone else. It was great artists copy, splendid artists steal or something like that. And again, we are not talking about stealing intellectual property. It's about really figuring out what works, doing the right market research, doing the proper due diligence for yourself, and then adapting and implementing all of those best practices in your own business. So again, another thing like something specific for Josh. He's from the States, from Utah, but he lives in China. And with that in mind, if you're targeting the Chinese market, especially Hong Kong or Shenzhen, this is probably one of the people who's going to be kind of your closest nemesis over the first few years. But even if that's not the case, you can see some of his events and figure out how are they organized, what's the usual size of a similar event, what are different topics. Like, for example, if you take a look, their startup grind, it's actually recurring. It's probably a good place for people and for the startup community, digital PR market class, some video trainings, Infopreneur Summit 2018, and so forth. So, most speakers are really listing these because this looks like the Hall of Fame for the different speaking engagements. It really helps event organizers vet you as a speaker to learn more about you, see how active you are, how actively you're presenting. Because even if you've had a bunch of talks like 10 years ago, you're probably a bit rusty now, you haven't been in practice for a while, and this may be kind of an obstacle. But looking at his track record, it's evident that he's pretty actively speaking and presenting, and through this he's kind of selling his services, his brand, and everything else that he does. Now, something else specific for Josh, and this is kind of the reason why I'm bringing this up, is he has a hire me to speak button. Again, that's very important because you probably want something like this on your website. And again, you can also break it down into specific sections like book me for an event, for a podcast, or a new source request. New source request is mostly if you need a quote for an article that you're writing for an established magazine or a publication. Also, you can easily find out that he has tons of content written for Fortune, Time, Forbes, Inc., Mashable, TechCrunch, and a bunch of other popular outlets. Again, that's really credible. Some of the kind of public personas that I know, they actually want to use public speaking in order to get to the writing field. Sometimes those are two completely different niches. Some people are more introverted and they feel better when writing. Some are more comfortable in front of stage. And again, some are hybrid and can really combine both things in one place. But again, this is a pretty great primer on how to kind of brand yourself as a public speaker, which is one of the reasons I'm sending Josh's profile. Again, he's been very helpful for me personally. We've had lots of valuable conversations with him. And again, his website is obviously designed with public speaking in mind and just generating more awareness and more brand positioning as a result of all that. So again, if we take a look at the Zealot checklist again, we have the business goal, we have the buyer personas. You have to design them for yourself, your specific industry. We've done some research, and this way we can reverse engineer what works for them. And also, you need to have a unique perspective, a unique proposition for the events you're presenting at. Now, the first conferences and meetups or whatever else you want to engage in, they are probably going to be for free or for a pretty low fee. There's nothing wrong with that. There are some speakers who speak for free for the most part, especially if they're selling expensive products or services and they're actually making out the revenue from that endeavor. But of course, there are also speaking engagements that go from anywhere between $2,500 to $20,000, and for some VIPs, this could be in the hundreds of thousands. But something between $5,000 to $10,000 for a paid speaking engagement for a reputable speaker is definitely not out of the question. So it could also be a way of life. I know some book authors who pretty much don't make their money off of actually selling books, but from doing keynote talks at different sorts of writing events, or just handing signatures at different book signing events as well. So again, this could be you really need to figure out what's the goal of the venture itself. What's the goal of you being a public speaker in the first place? What are the top 1, 2 things that you want to accomplish? And also be flexible and agile enough to make it work. Again, sometimes, and I'm going to use Josh's profile just because it's easy, but sometimes you can also go to a specific event, and for that certain event, you can go and see the list of speakers. Now, this one is training, so it's probably not the best idea, but probably the Impact Summit or Startup Grind. They should have a schedule, they should have a list of speakers, so this should be pretty easy to figure out who's talking. Now, you can see the keynote speakers, probably some of the people you really strive to be as them, more or less, and resemble what they're doing for a living. Now, you can see the thing I like here is there are people with different backgrounds, so it's really important for you to figure out how your background pans into all of that, and how to actually make it happen. Now, again, keynote speakers, you see, speaking leadership, peak performance, business growth with certain background. Now, Cynthia, marketing and personal branding expert, right? Satama, though, is former NFL Super Bowl champion, right? It's completely a different guy coming from a sports background. Again, it's a different game. Iron Cowboy, doing the Ironman challenge, Guinness World Record holder, and an extreme athlete, right? Again, another perspective, another type of background that you may not have thought of. So basically, if we look up James Lawrence, or if we look at top public speakers, top public athlete speakers or so, and if this is your niche, it's probably going to help you figure out who else is in this field. And then again, search where they speak, and then again, continue doing this until you find out other people within your field that you want to resemble one way or another. Now, number 4 is defining your unique brand proposition. And what I've just been discussing now is actually all about finding your unique brand proposition. Now, speakers and the way you actually go to a conference or a meetup and present at a speaking event, it doesn't really make sense if all of you are with the very same background, doing the very same thing, being completely unique, completely alike, because otherwise, the event organizers can just invite one person to do a full day training on whatever, right? So they are looking for some form of diversity. Now, it really depends on the event. Sometimes they're looking for specific skills. Sometimes they really present case studies and other success stories and other kind of experiences faced by different people. Sometimes they look for freelancers, and then enterprise CEOs. Then they look for young people, old people. Then they look for females at the workplace, and other people in some kind of other perspective, right? So again, sometimes there are different ways to brand yourself, and it's really important to determine your unique brand proposition. So the way you define it is basically you need to figure out what your unique skill set is, what you bring to the table, what your target audience is, what your niche offer is. And I'm saying niche offer because sometimes, again, we've discussed that while determining the market and what would be the market to pursue, right? So with that in mind, sometimes you may be selling marketing services, but again, marketing services could be for businesses or for freelancers, or marketing for services, or marketing for products, or in a specific vertical, specific niche, specific region, specific area, specific type of solution, like marketing for e-commerce versus software as a service versus publishers versus this versus that. So you can always niche down and combine 2 or 3 different things together in order to define a unique brand proposition. And again, if I come here, I'm probably going to find something like this, tech visionary. Okay, those are slightly more generic. But I would say that, for example, Dave is an author and leadership and HR expert. So this is a thought leader in the HR space, right? So this is unique if he's talking to HR people, because probably his background is mostly in recruitment and in the HR space, which is, again, really important. Now, This is marketing influencer. So, master of ceremonies. Okay, that's fun. Again, leadership expert, TEDx presenter. There are specific things that you can get. So, top branding expert by entrepreneur. So, while the other guys were, I'm just going to compare these two because they're on the same screen. But the first guy, HR expert, thought leader, author. So, what I read here is understands recruitment and dealing with people, thought leader, just some inspirational thoughts, and author, which is a writer, right? And here with Ryan, I see TEDx presenter. It's more of an inspirational speaker profile, then marketing influencer, then branding. So you see that they look alike, but still there are very specific segmentations and differentiations in order to be able to who deals with what and who's more suitable in a specific situation. So that's why you need to determine your unique brand proposition. Now, picking up the channel that works best when you're marketing yourself or public speaking, again, depending on the type of services you are selling, you want to market both to your specific audience because, again, you're selling speaking, but you're also selling a specific thing. So, unless it's speaking for a living, meaning that you want to earn 100% of your revenue from keynote talks and training courses, then you need to split with those two buyer personas, your direct clients and also event organizers, speaking teams, and everyone else dealing with the speaker applications, right? So with that in mind, again, you can do that same background research and then figure out what your specific proposition is, and then start pitching it everywhere. Now, one thing I want to mention here, which is really important, is different niches and different kind of industries work in different ways. And also by defining your unique brand proposition, you may actually have to go outside of your specific bubble. Now, what I'm talking about, if you are in tech space, for example, but you really provide services for marketing companies. Now, it doesn't make that much sense going to a tech conferences and speaking tech because this is by far the most common mistake I see. Like people trying to use conferences and meetup events for lead generation. They say, well, I went to this technical event and I couldn't sell tech to nobody. Well, I'm not really surprised by that because marketing people or salespeople, advertising, SEO, yada yada, they don't go to tech conferences. They go to marketing, advertisement, SEO, PR, whatever, other types of conferences. So if you have a unique twist that you can bring your technical knowledge to a marketing-based event, now you have a completely different new spin off of a approach for selling to your specific audience. But of course, that means that you have to brand your own website and social media profiles and content and everything else to be speaking to marketing people. Now, you may talk tech to marketers, but be careful. You don't want to get into too much, terms and any types of definitions and architectures, frameworks, libraries, and any type of technical slang that they don't understand. But again, if someone just sees you as a developer online, like, okay, great, you have a complex technical blog with complex architecture tutorials, you talk with lots of terms and abbreviatures, well, that doesn't really help you. That doesn't really help the speaking team to connect your brand and your profile to their type of conference. So again, you need to bridge the gap. You need to say, this is my core skill set, but I'm focused on this audience. And while doing this, you're effectively saying, I'm really valuable for a marketing conference or advertising, PR, SEO, because I've worked with similar businesses and I can help, I understand their problems and I can help them solve their problems through technology because I'm, the best person in the field. Now, one of my first technical gurus is a software engineer. He had a small company and he was only building accounting software. So he said, he was often joking around that. So what he was saying the following: I'm the best accountant among developers and the best developer among accountants. So I really love this one. So I often use it to just illustrate the point. But the point is, you really want to target the types of events that gather your specific audience. So more often than not, those are not going to be the events that you expect unless, again, you're doing business consulting and this is something that you probably have to go to business events to do business consulting. But more often than not, you actually have to define a channel that works for that. Now, other conferences, some are very specific. Like, for example, HubSpot have their inbound conference. Again, it's a marketing event. there are different ways to get there, but it's like one way to use it is just talk a lot about the inbound methodology, right? And implement in practice and have portfolio of clients or consult clients who use HubSpot. You have to have that bridging point. So the channel that works best is mostly inbound marketing and probably guest posts and other references and other ways to actually preach this inbound marketing trend, right? If you're going to a highly tech conference, you need to be sponsoring or supporting those events, or have, I don't know, a full-time engineer who's a contributor to open source software, something else that really makes you unique and gets your foot out of the door. And again, for some of these social media, and those are different channels as well, right? For, I don't know, e-commerce, small shopping events, they have Facebook groups, they have, different sorts of Facebook communities. Again, some of them are on Pinterest, so those may be channels that work for you. For most public speaking events, especially in the business marketing space, LinkedIn may be a great channel, especially if you become a thought influencer, meaning that you build a community and build regular content around it and building videos and articles and everything else. For some, it's completely their blogs. Especially if they, have paid promotional campaigns, basically they have PPC for sending traffic to their blog. If they have other forms of traffic going through their blog, if they have unique content which is extremely valuable going to their blog, and so on. For some, it's guest posting. Now I gave, I'm going to give two separate personas here. For example, Gary Vaynerchuk is really not great at writing, which is why he focuses most of his efforts on video. That's why he has videographers who are following him like shadows and snapshotting all sorts of experiences he's going through, because he's really great on video, and writing isn't really his forte. Josh Timely, whom I mentioned a bit earlier, he's really great at writing. Again, he has books. He has over 300 articles on Forbes Entrepreneur and whatnot. So he uses this as an opportunity to promote his brand and become kind of a unique thought leader here. For example, I've received some invitations for podcasts and for conferences thanks to my Quora presence, being a top writer on Quora. So some people ask me, hey, how did this happen? Like, can you talk about this? Or like, we have the standard people talking about Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, but we don't have anyone on Quora. So this is a unique angle, a unique perspective. Or some people in the tech space, they call me to talk about marketing for developers, because, or like marketing to freelancers or career advice for junior developers. It's a little bit, it's a different perspective, because they have all sorts of developers, but they have very few developers who profile in career coaching or, marketing or so. Which is why, for example, at marketing conferences, I've noticed multiple times that they really like growth hacking, which often enables a lot of tech, or they simply need some technical people talking about hosting environments or scalability or marketing automation software. Basically, they lack the technical expertise, so they look for people who are tech averse, but they can also talk to marketers directly, so that they're not going to scare them away with lots of tech limbo, right? So again, this is something that you need to define for yourself. Again, for most of those things, I've already shared some snippets and ideas and tools that you can use. And again, you can take advantage of those. I'm going to link back to the video. Determining the unique selling proposition. You have your company mission, target customers, products or services you're selling, and also the customer perception for yourself in order to define your brand. About the right channels, again, here I've only mentioned the standard social networks, but some of them, like I've seen lots of success stories with Hacker News. I've seen success stories with Reddit. So basically different channels that work very well simply because they're not oversaturated. That's why, YouTube is really well known for video, but some people are starting to use Twitch more for video, or Vimeo, or some other channels, or Periscope by Twitter, right? So people utilize different techniques and pick different channels in order to make it work and to become kind of top of mind there, right? You either have to be the best among the best, or to be a big fish in a small pond. And being a big fish in a small pond, of course, is easier. So if you're just starting out, this may be something that you kind of focus on, so that it's easier to skyrocket your efforts there and have a success story of your own, right? So that's pretty much it about kind of the right channels. And of course, number six is establishing a pilot marketing strategy. Now, if you have already been in the space, normally you would have your own website. If your website isn't really focusing on public speaking, you may have to review some of those sites that I just shared with you. Again, either Tony Robbins or whoever other speaker. Again, like you can just Google top public speakers. Again, in the US, go through most of those guys, or just Speaker Hub, for example, is a great site to browse those. And again, you have Tony Robbins and a bunch of other influencers who are really popular at public speaking, including some actors and some other folks with different perspectives, or Dave Ramsey, or a lot of other people. So just going through their specific websites, reviewing their profiles, their presentations, their slideshows, this can really help you get to unique perspective and deliver a better solution to yourself. So you need a website, you need to have some channels that work, or start working on specific channels. You may start applying to certain conferences for free at first, then build a network of event organizers, of other speakers. The more people you know, the easier it is to get an invitation somewhere, or just talk to other speakers and they say, hey, I'm speaking at this event over there. I think they're still accepting applications. Do you want to join? Or just follow those folks and see where are they going to present, follow the best conference in your industry, figure out, kind of keep track on the application speaking pool, create connections with those folks, provide unique value, provide, the type of value that would be really instrumental to your specific audience. And it's pretty much going to work out of the box. Now, again, it's not extremely complicated, but of course, first you're probably going to have to start with meetups and with smaller events and, less, reputable conferences. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's pretty much as every other type of business endeavor. And once you have that in place, then it would be really easy for you to just keep pushing further. Like with every other application, you would have this portfolio as the one we took a look a bit earlier, and you're going to say, well, here are some of the events that I've spoken at, and I also do consulting, and I also do this, and I also do that, so I feel fairly comfortable that I can deliver a great talk during this conference. And especially if you're also selling some other form of content, which is well-structured, well-defined content, such as books or courses, this also serves as a great reference for your portfolio. Now, it may be a good idea, this is kind of a separate piece of advice. Over the first conferences, if possible, try to bring someone who really takes wonderful photos of yourself, because most conferences, they have photographers, but they aren't really allocated to you. But especially when you're starting and you don't really have that many photos or video snapshots or whatnot of yourself, the first one or two conferences could be pretty instrumental, because most of your branding could be built on top of them. And this is going to look really personable and really easy for people to relate to you, because they're kind of live events that you have presented at with, you've spoken to other people at the events. There may be a sneak peek of the video, then trying to promote more of your events or videos on YouTube. Some of the challenges that people face, especially speaking approval teams, is with kind of reputable people in a specific industry who simply don't have a public speaking experience, or even if they have presented at 3, 4, 5, 6 conferences. I've had lots of kind of colleagues, approving speakers. They say, well, record a 5-minute video and send it to me just to see, the way you present, the way you structure content, pronunciation, pretty much everything else that's going on. So with that in mind, again, you can really make it easier for the people who are going to approve you and actually review your CV. You can connect to them. You can see where they hang out, what they read, what they follow. Try to pick one or two, if possible, of course, specific unique verticals to use them as something interesting, something that can pique their interest for you, or toward you rather, and then apply all that in practice. So this way, when you apply, you may say, because again, everyone is a great consultant, great expert in their field, a great yada yada yada. But people who are reviewing dozens or sometimes hundreds of CVs in that specific area, they need to see something unique. They need to kind of see something catchy, like again, founder of the most voted Reddit or something like that, or again, for a top writer, or published at Forbes, Inc., HuffPost, or something like that, or a columnist at Adweek, or something else, right? You just need to differentiate yourself in one way so that people can actually say, oh, okay, that's interesting. That's actually something that I don't see every day. And this may play really well with the other types of personas that are going to present at the event. So this may, again, give you the unique competitive advantage to join. And again, once you get your foot out of the door, you can start building up your own portfolio and everything else, and use this as the next step to land more speaking engagements and become a public speaker who's kind of promoting their own services and really pushing themselves to get paid to speak or simply get to more speaking gigs and throughout them sell their courses and books and everything else. So again, this is all about selling through marketing. Like obviously, I don't really have the time to build a completely new website from scratch and completely build a blog from scratch. But it's a very easy way to really reverse engineer other people. Just look up the type of people who speak at similar types of conferences on similar topics or with similar backgrounds. Reverse engineer what they do. See where they spend their time. Is it email list? Is it LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, Quora, Reddit, whatever it is? Do they publish somewhere else? Does it make sense? Because those people are busy. They spend a lot of time in public speaking, meaning that their precious time probably goes to the venues that have the highest return on investment. And of course, it doesn't mean that you can easily get there or that these are going to yield the very same results for you, but those are pretty much a great indicator of what works for them. So there's a better chance that this works for you as well. So yeah, that's pretty much it about the Zealot checklist. Of course, when you start building content, you will need to figure out the different forms of marketing funnel, how to start building an audience. But that's a different topic that we can tackle sometime else. Thanks for watching, and if you haven't subscribed yet, go to Marketing Techniques Unleashed, which is going to go with this post, and click the subscribe button on top. Thank you.